your venture, startup, or business plan project, you should be aware of the equity split. Coming up now. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell so YouTube lets you know whenever we're uploading new content. Now, today's topic is what you should do and what is the big elephant in the room when you're starting a new startup or venture. You know, very often start off with a project group and then you have those great ideas. You have 4 or 5 people that, you know, deal with marketing, with legal, with supply chain, a lot of different topics. But the big elephant in the room is not addressed. That is, how are we going to value the contribution of each of one in the new upcoming project? Let's face it, you could have started with a group of 4 people and suddenly 2 of them got great job offerings from, I don't know, Google, Facebook, Apple, whoever, BMW, Mercedes, and suddenly they're not available for the team anymore. Still, they contributed to your idea and they might have started with you at the beginning. Or 4 or 5 of you were starting this great idea and you were putting in all the efforts and you were so enthusiastic about this new venture, and then suddenly only 2 of you are left because one started a different career or started a different education, or you happen to realize that the venture you're planning wouldn't support all 4 of you at the beginning, but only one. Very difficult situation. In general, all of these things are important, but you know, what is more important is that you're dealing with some topics prior you getting into all the fuzzy and hard work of your new venture. One of them being, who is really in charge? This is the most critical one from the start because it is not going to work to have 4 CEOs in one company. You have to define someone, one single person who will decide finally about all steps. You will, of course, assign other parts of the team's members into senior other roles for marketing, for instance, or for operations, for communications, for research and development. I mean, there are so many other things that those people will have to deal with and which are very, very important. But you need one CEO, someone who has a final decision for that venture at all times. Because otherwise, you will end up in endless, useless discussions that turn around in a circle and never end. The next thing you have to deal with is the equity split. How are you going to distribute the equity of the company to whom? Many people at the beginning think it's a great idea to have an equal equity split, but as soon as things become difficult, then you have those endless discussions about why you should do something, why you not, and you cannot really decide because no one has the power to do something about it. So you have to find a better way to come up with a very valuable way of distributing the equity of your company. And maybe you should have some references on, let's say, what are people contributing. Let's say you have made an invention and 4 other people in that group actually come up with marketing plan, legal structures, further R&D and or customer services. Then of course, maybe the person who has had the IP in the first place should have, let's say, a different equity split than the others. Could be one way. Let's say you have a group of 4 people. Even though all of you are working hard, we have to think in terms of the value of a company. Is it fair that someone who does, let's say, marketing or shipping or other forms of service that actually could be theoretically bought externally from a third party, should they be really getting the same amount of equity split than those people who have had the idea in the first place and who have maybe had proprietary know-how? Or who brought in the relevant network of investors? All of this is really relevant, especially if you're in need of investors in the long run, because they will look very clearly and very sharp on who is actually having which part of ownership in this company and what is the contribution of those people. Investors hate companies where the equity is split to people who have had, let's say, a minor impact on the overall system, but still have a major equity share. In this case, you might be urged to buy back the shares from those people prior the investor really investing in you, in your company. And you can come up with some sort of, calculation. Let's say we're going to value factor A with X% and factor B with Y%, etc., so that you come up with a combined factor of what the equity should be split for this person. Furthermore, you can also have some reserved parts of the equity, 1 to 3%, for those people contributing to your company, let's say for marketing or other purposes, that you could have bought in by a third party, but you still want to have them, having a fair share in the company. Furthermore, it is important that you might not directly give it to them, but rather have, let's say, those equities being paid out on the terms that make you work or contribute a significant amount of time of your life and your workforce to the success of the project. And then something that many people at the beginning never think about, but what happens if someone leaves early? What are you going to do? Are you just going to let those people go and not ask for the equities that they have? Should they give all the equity back? Should they give parts of it back? On what basis do you determine how much equity they are actually worth at the time they're leaving? In some countries, let's say for instance in the UK, lawyers need or like to phrase the terms of good leaver and bad leaver, where a good leaver is someone who is, let's say, forced to leave the company because the revenue isn't there yet and so they cannot support him, or in the bad leaver, who is actually someone who is just leaving the company by himself or is misbehaving, etc. Then of course this type of way of thinking helps on the superficial level, but in reality causes a lot of discussions, endless discussions on, am I a good leaver or am I a bad leaver? Because many people are afraid they lose too much of an equity share, and if the company is worth something, you're gonna have a big fight upfront to you. Other ways are, like, let's say, depending on the effort and time that you put in, and I think that is a more reasonable way to do it, because this way you can ensure that people who have spent a significant amount of time get their fair share. And if they leave, nothing you can do about it, but you then have, let's say, they have a fair share of their effort put into the company. And it might not be 25%, but let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. is increasing. Also, someone might not leave voluntarily, but might not be able to return. What are you going to do with people if they suddenly die or are disabled and not able to work again in the company? You have to think of these things in the first place and prior of you starting the project, and a lot of people's work and hard time putting into that project and then becoming, personally addicted to it and then starting up big fights. Take the time prior you digging too deep in the project, defining those key elements so that everybody is agreeing to them before they actually fear of losing too much. Finally, put it in writing. It is so essential that you write down what you've agreed on, because later on it's going to be difficult if you just have a verbal conversation with someone and then these people, might not recall it, might have different recognition of what has been talked about. Don't go down that road. Put some minor things in writing and you should be good. It doesn't need to be a perfect legal contract. That's not the point. Put down the key elements in point, let the people sign it off. You're good to go. Hope this was helpful to you. Up here on this video, you can learn how to start a business from scratch. And of course, if you have some comments and something that you have experienced yourself, just leave a comment down below and see you next time.